Yo, 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 visualize shark takes, hit the wave grinding. In the chat, gun shark odds make it rhyming. Sunday vibes, smooth bets, no confining. Hats engaged, can't stop us from shining. Bet on the spread, liking it, keep it tight. Push the odds further, jack on the hindsight. Odds fellows mind grasping the right sight. Hats, caps on heads, winners in plain sight. Hit the light, get in the chat, feel the flow, cash it, every dollar see the bank roll. Sunday grind and picks, now you gotta know. Extra points on the screen, sharp minds always glow. Big parlays, predictions, we home. Standing tall, betting knowledge all.
On a suddenly not so casual Sunday in November, it is NFL, the extra points, the big show, week 11. Sunday, November 17th, 2024, the Shark, the Gun, and he's back, the Odds Fellow, right here live on Sharky Waters Nation, X and YouTube, and the Guns Picks channel. Early morning show this morning, gentlemen and ladies. Fire it off with us. Guns Picks, what's going on, brother?
Oh, man, had a nice little Saturday for myself in college football, ready to carry this over into the NFL. Listen, we've been cooking with napalm on this show. If you've been following along, you've been cashing tickets, and we got the main man back in the building, the Odds Fellow. What's going on, my friend? How you doing on this beautiful Sunday?
Working off a little sleep, but that doesn't matter because I saw the great Johnny Bones Jones dominate at the Garden last night, and it was worth every lack of sleep that I got because of it. What an electric atmosphere. I hope we carry that over into Sunday. Good to be back.
Absolutely. It's been about a month and a half. We had our guy Sean Green on here dropping the fire last week. Shout out to him. I think he went 5-1 on the show. Tough week for me last week. I called it the weekend that you always fear, but we are not fearful. We are ready to dominate this week. A lot of great looks. A lot of bounce back spots, buy low, statistical points. And we are starting off 1 o'clock in Nashville, Nissan Stadium, out of conference football. Not exactly your old school Leatherhead rivalry game here, but Sam Darnold and the Vikings traveling within this division at Jacksonville last week, at Tennessee this week, opening up the broadcast with the Gun, Minnesota, Tennessee under 39.5.
Yeah, I like this, the total on this one. I can't talk you off the side on the Minnesota one. I think Shark will get to that in a second. But let's talk about the total here. Minnesota is ranked 3rd in the league in opponent scoring, holding opponents to 17.4 points per game. Minnesota has held AFC opponents to 7, 17, 3, 13, and 7 points per game in the 4 AFC games that they have played, or AFC opponents for that matter. Then you got to look at Tennessee. They're ranked 27th in offensive scoring, so this team doesn't put up a lot of points at all. They only average 17.4 points per game. You look at Minnesota on the trends, 4-0 to the under versus AFC opponents this season. I think this is just going to be a one-sided scoring event here, and you need 2 teams to get to an over, as I always say. So I think this is going to be by margin type of situation, maybe for the Minnesota side with a Tennessee team that can't score. Give me the under in this game, Shark, at 39.5 as the play.
Yeah, I like it. And I think your point about a one-sided scoring affair is very accurate here. And my first official of this week on this Sunday, we're taking Minnesota at -5.5. That is 6 in some books. And I think this is a great statistical buy low for the Vikings. Obviously, fairly noteworthy. Did start the season on fire ATS. Now only 1 in 3 ATS last 4. So I think you're getting a nice small window buy low just purely statistically. And if you really go through those non-cover, they all make sense. Back to a game a few weeks ago in the division against Detroit. Could have won the game. It was a real coin flip late. Detroit looks like the best team in the sport right now. Let that be what it is. Then they got hammered at the Rams and kind of a sketchy travel spot on a short week after the divisional loss to Detroit. Again, let that be what it is. Go back to last week at Jacksonville. 12-7 non-cover. If you saw that score, you would think there was no activity in the game whatsoever. Quite the contrary. 3+ territory interceptions for Sam Darnold, 2 at the goal line or in the end zone. Minnesota outgained Jacksonville 402 to 143, 28 first downs versus only 10. You know how hard it is to only score 12 points with that data dispersion on offense? So this is an inevitable bounce back this week. And this is a great calendar spot for a Kevin O'Connell Vikings team. When I found this, it reminded me of a comment Guns made about Mona Lisas of handicapping, because I was blown away by this particular statistic. Kevin O'Connell is 7-3 in his career as a head coach, road outside of the division. This appears to be a bad travel spot. At Jacksonville, at Tennessee, and then Chicago next week. 3 consecutive home games. In this window with O'Connell, Minnesota is 4-0 ATS on the second leg of a road sequence, and 3-0 ATS off a previous non-cover. And it's interesting because we talked about within this division, the Lions being terrible on the second leg of a road sequence. Well, Minnesota is excellent. And speaking of being terrible, the Titans are just that. And I saw some people buying the Titans, and I know there's a faction of bettors that love quote-unquote sharp dogs, contrarian takes, almost as much as Joe Public likes a nice short favorite. There is no rationale to buy this Titans team at all. 1-7-1 ATS. This is where Brian Flores and this defense will bottle up the quarterback. And if you really go through how Tennessee has played against this division, took a margin loss at Chicago, got blown out at home against Green Bay, and got absolutely blown out on the road at Detroit. The NFC North is one of the best divisions in football. The AFC South is one of the worst. This is really going to be a hammer spot for Minnesota at 1 o'clock outside the division. Buy it, live it, love it, and let's dominate. Going to Anthony, another out-of-division spot here, out of conference in New Orleans at 1 o'clock, Little Caesars Superdome. Hey, you haven't been on here in weeks. You've been cashing tickets off the record. One on the record. Looking at Cleveland -1.5.
Yeah, good to be back. Good to be official. Hopefully I don't stumble my way through this because it's been so long, but it's great to be back. But I love the bye week look here, right? Coming off the bye week, a return to Nola for Jameis. The Saints got their little interim coach bump last week. We saw that, right? And that was a brutal, ugly win, probably a game that they shouldn't have won. You benefit there from 3 missed field goals by a great kicker in Koo, which was shocking in and of itself. And I think this is a Cleveland defense that's going to be able to generate much more pressure against a bad Saints offensive line, right? A banged up Saints offensive line. That's the difference between what Atlanta could do on that defensive front and the pressure rate versus what the Saints could do, versus rather what Cleveland can do in this game today. So I'll take Myles Garrett against a rookie left tackle all day. And if Myles isn't getting it done on his own, I think you're going to see that blitz rate from Jim Schwartz and that defensive coordinator and the way he likes to run. I think they're top 5 in blitz rate in the league. And then on the other side of the ball, right, this is a Browns offensive line, and Guns is going to touch on this a little bit when he gets into some of the passing attack. I actually think they're going to be able to run the ball a bit too. But they're definitely going to be able to protect Jameis. It's the first time since 2024 or in 2024 that these guys are fully intact. A good offensive line unit over the last few years, and something they've built a lot of this Cleveland Browns turnaround on. That team is now back intact, right? They're going to do this for Jameis. I think they're going to be able to protect Jameis. I think they're going to be able to get Nick Chubb going. And I just don't think the Saints have enough firepower. So I'll take it at -1.5. I like it up to -3. You know, you got to watch the extra points and 2-point conversions these days. But yeah, Cleveland -1.5. They get it done for Jameis.
Yeah, I think this is a great conversation. I think this is really the beauty of shows like this. And I love working with you guys. And we love bringing the energy to people on a beautiful Sunday morning. But this is a game that really looks like a grease fire disaster. 2-7 versus 3-7. But we got 3 officials in the game. Guns has 2. Guns, talk to me.
Yeah, I agree with Ant's sentiment on that one with Cleveland, but I'm taking them on the money line here because I can get it at -120 right now. And a lot of the points were kind of made in this one. 2-7 on the year for Cleveland. You have a New Orleans team 3-7 on the year, and off a win with their interim head coach. And Chris Rocher in the chat said it best: "Is like you buy a new coach first game, you fade him the second game." I agree with that sentiment completely. What is Cleveland going to want to do in this game is what I want to spell out here, and this kind of gets to my prop as well. They're going to want to pass the ball. They're second in pass play percentage, 3rd in passing attempts per game. So this Cleveland's going to air it out, and they're going against a New Orleans team that has underperformed against the pass this season. They're ranked 24th in opposing pass yards per play, 29th in opposing pass yards per game, and they're also 26th in QB sack rate. So they're not going to be getting to the quarterback and putting pressure on Jameis today. And then you look at it, New Orleans has underperformed at home, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They give up 421 yards of total offense at home this season, 6 yards per carry on the ground. So maybe some running props might be something you want to look at on this one with Nick Chubb. They also have a -113 point differential at home. They're just awful in their own stadium. And then New Orleans is underperformed versus non-conference opponents this season. You have 2-6 ATS versus non-conference opponents dating back to last year, and they're already 0-3 ATS this season versus the AFC, and they have a minus 18-point differential versus the AFC this year, missing the cover by an average of 12.8 points per game. And then you have Cleveland just done well off with rest advantage and off a bye because they're coming off a bye this week. 3-1 ATS in those type of situations. And New Orleans, when they're going against a team that is more rested than them, they are 0-3 ATS going against that particular team. And I love the Cleveland side on this one. And when we talk about the props, we love Jameis on the over on this one, 35.5 passing attempts. Jameis in his 2 starts has put up 41 and 46 passing attempts. So in this type of situation, going against a New Orleans defense that is, like I said, 27th in the league in opposing passing attempts per game, 34.3 on average, and you got a Cleveland team that is ranked 2nd in pass play percentage. So you're going to see Jameis getting back under center, ripping the ball down the field versus an anemic New Orleans defense. So I love the prop over here, 35.5 passing attempts, and give me Cleveland on the money line as well at minus 120.
Yeah, and that really segues me into my official play on this game, over 44. And as Gunn said, we think Jameis is going to have a ton of passing attempts. We think this game is going to be wide open. And truly, I think this is going to be just 2 gunslingers, 2 veterans. Crazy to say Jameis a veteran. I remember when he came out of FSU at 21 with the Bucks, but here we are in 2024. He's a veteran, and he's a gunslinger. The game's going to be wide open. And it's also just a great statistical buy low on New Orleans. New Orleans is actually coming off of an under last week in the division against the Saints, 20-17. Another score that doesn't tell you the actual dispersion within the game, 833 yards. The Saints gave up 400 yards to Atlanta, and Atlanta only scored 17 points. And a lot of times with these games, you can kind of sense maybe an developing right off the bat. The first offensive play of the game for the Saints was an 88-yard touchdown back due to penalty. And then they proceeded to drive the length of the field anyway and go 4 and out at the goal line. So you talk about just immediately penalty wasting time to not score points with an insane accumulation of yards. And there were 3 missed field goals in the game by Atlanta kicker Young Hong Koo. So just let that stand for itself. This is where you want to buy the same environment the following week. And New Orleans is actually 3-0 versus the over this year off a previous under. So they don't sustain unders really ever. And I think this is a great spot to buy Cleveland, too. Winston Start won a couple weeks ago in the division against Baltimore, a Baltimore defense that actually has been a little sketchy this year situationally. 29-24, over. Key point, what was the number? 44.5. Books had the game graded right in this environment. And then last week, of course, Jim Harbaugh in this absolutely stout Chargers defense completely bottled up Jameis. A game we did suggest that would happen. I said on this show, Jameis will have 2 interceptions in this game. He had 3. We weren't wrong. We knew that would happen. And now we expect a complete opposite environment. Final point on this game. Last time these teams played 2 years ago, it was Andy Dalton, the perpetual journeyman. I feel like this guy's played for 15 teams at this point versus Deshaun Watson. It was Christmas Eve 2022, 17-10. And the books nailed the line, which is interesting because this is not divisional football. So you don't expect them to nail the line. They did. That was an under 32. And now this jumps up to 44.5. I have this graded at 56 points. I think you're going to see a really entertaining game here, actually, at 1 o'clock in New Orleans. Bunch of officials in this one. Take the over. Take Jameis over in the attempts market. And take Cleveland 1.5 or the money line. Guns picks. Further comments.
Yeah, I got some notes. I'm actually more towards the over on this one because I lean the same side as you do, and you made it perfectly clear with the 44. 44 is a key number there for Cleveland because every time that number hits 44 this year, and it's hit twice. Over has hit in both of those type of spots, and you got to look at the fact that both of these teams are really low end on the offensive scoring, but on the New Orleans side, that was due to not having Derek Carr in the lineup. When he's in the lineup in his 6 starts, New Orleans averages 28 points per game and has only scored under 20 points once, and that was in the Philly game at home. So they're 4-2 to the over when Carr plays. So, yeah, I think the only way to play this is over. Look for a high-scoring affair with these two dumpster fire of a teams.
Absolutely an opportunity to dominate. Stay at 1 o'clock in New York City, or I should say East Rutherford. Jets coming back home. One of the biggest disasters in football right now. Had you to August, people were talking about a Super Bowl. Now this team's getting blown out by double digits on the road to the Cardinals and looking totally useless in the process. Now they come back home against the Colts, a similarly frustrating team, flip-flopping quarterbacks. We get Anthony Richardson back this week. Well, guess what, son? You get to face the Jets defense in your return. Welcome back. And welcome back, Anthony Latino. You love unders. You find yourself on one here. Talk to me, 43.5.
Go low. It might be what I literally do best in this beautiful environment that we have cooking, right? And yeah, we're going low again, 43.5. I wish it was north of 44.5. That's a key number, as you guys mentioned a lot in these totals. But I think it really speaks to the quarterback play that you're going to see here on display today. Anthony Richardson back. Don't really know why. I mean, I guess at this point, right, what else do you have to prove? They're trying to figure out what they have in this guy. They wasted a top 10 pick. They moved around. The Flacco experiment was starting to wear off a little bit. Maybe some of that Cleveland Browns magic from last year just can't sustain itself. And yeah, Anthony Richardson might be good for one or two explosive plays, but it really doesn't lead to sustained offensive production and points, right? Instead, I think what they're going to do is rely on a heavy dose. You have to, of Jonathan Taylor and a running game, which should grind and slow that clock a little bit. And then you insert the Jets defense. Now, statistically, the Jets defense is a good one. You may not feel that way if you've been watching the Jets every single week and they can't get stops in big moments of games, right? But from a pure statistical standpoint, they're actually first at home in TDs allowed per game, right? So what does that mean? They're keeping the other offenses out of the end zone. I want 3 points here. I want a goose egg here, right? So if we keep that combined with that Colts offensive struggles, a couple interceptions maybe, or some turnovers or some weird production that you're going to get from Richardson, I think that spells well. On the Jets side of the ball, right, because obviously they could go off at any time when you look at it purely on paper with all the weapons that they have, but they just continue to have breakdowns and injuries on the offensive line. They can't protect Rodgers, right? He can't get on the same page with these wide receivers. Devontae Adams hasn't done anything since he came over. I think he's got like 17 targets or something. So it's really going to look very interesting. I think it's going to be a lot of the same Jets offense that you've seen. They're statistically ranked 26th in yards per game, 26th in points per play, 22nd in yards per play, 10th in third down conversion, 29th in fourth down conversion, 24th in red zone scoring TD percentage, and 23rd in TDs per game, right? That offense alone, even against a bad Colts defense, just hasn't put up the sustained production. Do they get going a little bit? Sure, maybe. But I actually think I had the Colts and the Bills under last week. I think it's going to be a similar game flow. The only way this happens is if we're getting backdoored. And that's essentially what happened. The Colts scored late to push their point total to 20. And then Buffalo ended up coming back and getting a late TD in that one. So you had a kind of a flurry of points in the fourth quarter. That game was trending under the entire time. And I think that closed at 45 or 46.5. And I think you're going to get similar game flow here. The Colts not being able to do enough and us just hoping that the Jets, continue that sustained production the way they have this entire year to keep us under 43.5. So go low.
Yeah, this game, in my opinion, is a tough cap. Both teams, to a certain degree, far below expectations. But something I found to be pretty interesting, obviously, in a slightly expanded playoff picture now in 2024, Indy's only one game back of
and
Denver.
The Jets are only one game behind that.
Two back.
Yeah.
So it's actually crazy how the expanded season with an extra game in the playoffs now. Yeah. These teams are, you can't really say they're alive, but they're not totally dead.
Look,
particularly
Indy. Take it to the fight I was at last night. They have a puncher's chance, right? You keep swinging, right. You keep punching, especially Indy more so.
Yeah, and when I saw Indy was only one back, I was thinking to myself, okay, Indy's got to be the buy here. And just as a line environment, this is not line functionality. It's more so just analyzing the numbers. When I see Pittsburgh laying 3 points on the road at Indy, and I only see the Jets laying 3.5 at home, if we go back to early season, I think you could say that you probably value the Jets and Pittsburgh similarly. So if Pittsburgh lays 3 on the road, that would be 6 or 7 at home, which means the Jets should be laying 7 at home, which is probably short. So I would actually lean towards Indy. I think the Jets are in shambles. We said this before. Firing their coach, Aaron Rodgers seems, to be perfectly honest, maybe on his way out the door. We said this in week 3 or 4. People quickly forget he didn't look great in his later years with Green Bay. So just because he came to the New York area and the media was all over it didn't mean this was going to work very well. I would probably lean towards Indy, albeit not a stat packing machine here, is very athletic. And I think he can do some stuff here. Guns, any thoughts on this game?
I like the total. I think this is an under. Like, I agree with everything Odds just said there. I looked at a little bit further, and I looked at the Anthony Richardson. How did this team perform when he's the starter? They're 4-1 to the under when he's a starter with an average outcome total of 37.6 points per game. Indy's also a road under team too, 4-1 to the under. Total outcome 42.2 points per game. But you have to understand that includes a 71-point outcome versus Jacksonville on the road too. So there's an inflated outlier in that. And then you got to look at the Jets. They've just not allowed opponents scoring at home. We're talking 3-10, 23, and 23 was a divisional opponent in Buffalo. I think Buffalo has a pretty good offense last time I checked, and they held Houston to 13 points. So on average, 14 points per game given up to opponents at home. So, and I don't trust that New York Jet offense. I think they're in shambles. I think, I don't expect them to go scoring more than 20 points in this game. And if they can hold their Indianapolis to 14 or under or near the average, this thing's going to sail under. So, yeah, the under is the only way to go on this. I like it at 43.5.
Yeah, my next play, we're going again out of conference football, 1 o'clock in Foxborough. Guns has the hat on, fading the hat this week, taking the Rams. Got it at 3.5 on a market shift overnight on FanDuel, actually, at about 3 in the morning at 3.5. Jumped right back up, but 4.5 is fine now. And I think you're finding a great statistical buy low, sell high here. Rams come into the game off a pretty lackluster home loss on Monday Night Football versus Miami. Just underachieved throughout the game in pretty much all facets. And now you get to go to the road, which is an interesting numerical analysis. The Rams are actually 1-3 ATS on the road. Key point, though, they opened as a dog in all 4 of those games. First time they're favored on the road all year. And they did start 3-6. And interestingly enough, last year, they actually started 3-6 straight up. And I mean 3-6 ATS this year, excuse me. But last year, they started 3-6 straight up. And they finished the season 7-1 to go to the playoffs. So interesting psychological discussion with this group. Sean McVay's been around for a while. He's won a Super Bowl. He's won a Super Bowl in recent history, if we're being perfectly honest. This team seems to be maybe Bengals-esque. They don't
See
who
cut
these
out.
teams are as things flip quickly week to week. But I think you're going to really see this upward momentum continue for this team throughout the rest of the season. And this is a great spot to sell New England. New England is 5-5 ATS. They're 3-0 ATS last 3. When you find a team with a rookie quarterback who's 3-0 ATS in a window, you want to sell that. And if you really look at what they've done in that window, it is fool's gold. Backdoored the Jets in week 8, final drive touchdown after the Jets missed multiple field goals. Backdoored Tennessee, a very poor Tennessee team. Final play, Drake May running around, should have been tackled 10 times, somehow miraculously completes the ball for a touchdown and a backdoor cover. And then last week, beat down Chicago on the road. Chicago's in complete disarray, so it's a great sell point. And New England, with Drake May at quarterback, is 0-2 at home or neutral site as a significant underdog. +7 at home, lost by 20 to Houston. +6.5 in London, lost by 16 to the Jags. This is where the Rams will turn up their quality. New England is too hot in this environment. Buy the Rams at -4.5 and total under 43.5.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair here because it is in Foxborough, it is in New England, and you got the Rams coming off a short week, right? They've struck, and if you break down the Rams, basically, they've won 3 out of the last 4 games. So yeah, I probably agree with the sentiment on Shark, what he said on the side. The defense has stepped up, holding their opponents to 314 yards per game of total offense, and held their opponents to 20 points or less in 3 out of those 4 games too. So this is why I like the total on this one. And then you got to look at the Rams. They've struggled really scoring on the road, and that had a lot to do with losing a lot of key weapons, though. So take that with a little bit of grain of salt on this one. But even with those guys returning when they got into full strength, and I mean with Puka Nacua and getting Cooper Kupp back, they've only put up 23 points per game in their last 4. So I think this is an offense that is, probably going to be a little bit more methodical, time of possession type of situation here dealing with New England. New England's offense isn't that good either. They've put up less than 300 yards of total offense in all but 2 games this season, and they also are struggling scoring. They're ranked 31st in offensive scoring this season, averaging 17 points per game versus non-divisional opponents too. So also New England on a terrible run. This is probably why you should take the side on this one. 1-6-1 versus the NFC, and they covered last week versus Chicago. So there's the cover there. But you got the Rams have gone under 4 out of the last 5 games, and they're off a short week playing Monday Night Football. I don't expect a high-scoring affair in Foxborough. It's cold. It's November. And you have a Rams team that is playing off a home game on Monday Night Football, traveling all the way to New England to go play in this game. I think it's just going to be a little bit of a flat type of situation, especially with New England coming off a win 19-33 in ugly fashion. I think this is going to be low scoring. Give me the under here, 43.5.
Yeah, and just one more point on this, because I did see some people buying New England this week thinking it's a bad spot for the Rams. Every spot in football potentially has some sort of negative to it. I mean, we get it. Monday Night Football, traveling to the East Coast. But you have to remember, they probably arrived here on Friday or Saturday. This is not like they just showed up here this morning on like a reverse red-eye flight where they showed up at like 2 a.m. Like, they've been here for a few days. And truthfully, when you look at the Rams, something I wanted to mention, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the Niners game against the Seahawks. The Rams are very much alive, not only in the playoff race and the wild card, but this division. This division is incredibly tight with all the teams in the division within 1 game of each other, 1.5. You have Arizona leading 6-4, San Francisco 5-4, Rams and Seahawks 4-5. So the point is, the motivation in the game is huge because these are basically playoff games for the Rams at this point. And as I mentioned, they started last year flat. They're continuing the upper momentum. So just remember, just because a team is traveling from west to east and played Monday Night Football doesn't mean it's just a dead zone spot by default. And this is where I think trends can lead people into some sort of handicapping disarray. Like long-term over the course of 40 years, this is not a good spot, but you really have to hone into what's going on in this game. So take the Rams at -4.5 and let's cash. Next play, going to Baltimore, divisional football. A lot of 1 o'clock games this week, not too many 4 o'clocks. I got an official on the side in this one. Another total from the gun. He's not usually a totals guy. Pay attention, people. Taking the over at 48.5.
Yeah, when I play totals, at least from my record that I looked at on Dub Club, I think the totals have been kind of my bag, but I just don't play them enough. Today, I'm going to be playing them a lot here, and I like the over in this game versus Baltimore-Pittsburgh. Listen, you have Baltimore back-to-back wins, 7-3 on the year with a plus 7-point differential going against a Pitt team that is red hot. 4-game win streak coming into this game. Now they're 7-2, so this is going to be a banger here in Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. You look at Baltimore. Baltimore is one of the best scoring teams in the league, right? They're 32 points per game this season. They're ranked number 1 in offensive scoring. And then Pittsburgh on the other side has opened up the scoring in the last 4 games, putting in Russell Wilson, who I thought was dead to rights. Hand up, I was wrong. This guy is actually a better option there than Justin Fields. They're putting up 31 points per game in their last 4 games. So this is a Pittsburgh team that has a rejuvenation as far as their offensive production is concerned. Then you have Baltimore. They're ranked 25th in opposing scoring this year, 25.3 points per game given up. And 30 points per game given up on the road, 34 points per game given up versus divisional opponents. So this is an over team. And then you got Pittsburgh. Hasn't played a divisional opponent all season, but they faced the 24th toughest schedule as well. So they've got a little bit of a step up in class here when dealing with the Ravens. And it's funny because I looked at that. You look at the numbers when these two teams meet, and every time these two teams meet, it's always been an under. 6 straight unders in this matchup, but the last 4 totals were under 40 points. That was what the line was set at. Now you're seeing it at 48.5, which is uncharacteristic. They have not seen a total this high since 2018 when these two teams meet. Both teams can score at a high rate now, and I think these teams are going to come in red hot. You have a Baltimore defense that can't really stop anyone, and I think Baltimore is going to get their points because they're one of the best scoring offenses in the league. So I think this sails over here today in Pittsburgh. Give me the over, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, 48.5.
Yeah, my official play, buying the Ravens here at -3. And Guns, you said it. Low scoring games. When I was looking at this in terms of last year, I was actually kind of blown away. Pittsburgh beat Baltimore twice last year by the same exact score, 17-10. And one of those was with Lamar Jackson at Acrisure Stadium early season. The last one, week 18, was Mason Rudolph versus Tyler Huntley. And that really is the opening point for me in this game. Pittsburgh has beaten Baltimore 3 consecutive times in this division. 2 with Tyler Huntley, who, of course, now plays for the Dolphins. So Lamar wants revenge. The Ravens want revenge. They're full staff this week. And I'll tell you even better, this is a spot to buy the Ravens off of a non-cover. You have to go back Thursday Night Football, Week 10, November the 7th. Did not cover a home game against Cincinnati. Final possession touchdown for Cincinnati. Did not get 2 points to win the game outright. 34 non-cover. Last 9 times Lamar Jackson or the Ravens did not cover. They're 8-1 ATS in the following week. Incredible ATS bounce back team. And when you look at Pittsburgh, I don't know if I'm going to say 1-1A, but Pittsburgh is definitely top 3 in the league in terms of fool's gold, in my opinion. 7-2 ATS, 3-0 ATS with Russell Wilson. The mainstream media has just re-anointed this guy, just giving him the crown after 3 weeks, saying that Tomlin absolutely made the right decision. Like, he's back. This is 2014 Super Bowl Wilson. Well, guess what, guys? He was down huge to the Jets at home, and then the Jets just stopped playing football. The Jets are terrible. That is not impressive. Then he beat another New York team the next week as well, the Giants. Friendly reminder, the Giants are also terrible, probably benching their quarterback, maybe firing their coach. And then last week, beat Washington. I made a mistake and took Washington on Thursday Night Football, but Washington has not looked good for a few weeks now. So I think Washington might be cratering down a bit. Point being, 3 out-of-division opponents that all seem to have some holes in their armor. Baltimore is a divisional opponent that is absolutely elite. And final point on this, in terms of the line, books actually did have Pittsburgh favored on the road in the last matchup and nailed the line. So this is clean divisional line functionality. Pittsburgh should be favored in this matchup. Expected the same type of results. Baltimore -3 road versus this previous number actually suggests Baltimore to win this game by 13 points. I think Pittsburgh has it coming to them. They're too hot. The media is all over them. Love Baltimore today at -3. Anthony, any thoughts on this game, or are we moving along?
Just on the total, I think you guys nailed it, and I love that overlook. I mean, Wilson has been better in this offense, right? The Pittsburgh, it's not where they started the year at all. Over the last couple of games, he's racked up 737 yards, 6 touchdowns, and only 1 pick. So he's also playing clean over the last 3 games. And you get a perfect storm against a Baltimore defense from a secondary standpoint that's just not getting it done. I think they've allowed 76% of their touchdowns allowed coming through the air, second worst in the NFL from a percentage standpoint. Now Kyle Hamilton might be out. So I think you're going to get a shootout, and in the long run, I do agree. I think Lamar and the Baltimore offense is too much to handle.
Absolutely. Stay at 1 o'clock. As I said, most of the games this week at 1 o'clock. Another official from me. We're taking another divisional game here on the road at -6. And this is yet another great statistical buy low. Green Bay comes into this game 0-3 ATS last 3. But if you really go through them, it makes it a great buy element. Go back to week 7, 24-22 Houston, -2.5 line, hook line, and they outgained Houston significantly, 277 to 197. couple weeks ago against Jacksonville, 30-27, another hook non-cover playing the AFC South. There, Jordan Love injured, 12:07 third quarter. So they played most of the second half with a backup quarterback. And then go back to week 9, pre-bye, 24-14 loss to Detroit. Say it again, Detroit is elite. There's no shame in losing to Detroit, but even within that box score, Green Bay dominated the game. 411 yards to only 261. So they haven't covered 2 out of the last 3 games, absolutely dominating the box score. Great statistical buy low, and Green Bay, similar to the conversation with Lamar Jackson, is 4-1 last 5 ATS off a prior outright loss. So they bounce back, and they're coming off a bye week. And even more noteworthy here, Jordan Love in his career is 1-4 at home in the division, ATS. For whatever reason, he just doesn't play well at Lambeau against these divisional opponents. Go to the road out inside the division environment. 3-0 ATS in his career. Road games in the division. Blowouts. Last year, week 1, 38-20 at Chicago. Very impressive Thanksgiving Day game last year. At Detroit, significant underdog, outright win 29-22. And week 17 last year at Minnesota, 33-10. Average win margin by 16 points per game against the money line. And you look at Chicago, again, I'm seeing contrarian takes on Chicago this week. I don't get it. You look at what Chicago's done this year. They started 3-0 ATS at home. Tennessee, an injured Rams team, and Carolina. You cannot make an argument that I would ever agree with telling me that Chicago's impressive in any right. I understand that they fired their offensive coordinator. I get it. I still don't think Caleb Williams is in that element. I don't think he's seeing defense as well. He holds onto the ball for far too long. I think this Green Bay defense will be preying on him. And this is, again, a divisional line functionality spot. Green Bay last year at home laid 2.5 points. They're laying more on the road than they were laying at home. This speaks to margin yet again. It's where Jordan Love bounces back and plays well on the road in this spot. Very similar to the Lamar Jackson conversation and the Rams. Every play I have this week is a great statistical buy low. Love Green Bay to continue some upward momentum this week. Take it at -6, the official. Guns, any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go and be the contrarian, take the the Bears. Go right ahead. How many times has Green Bay covered in a row? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in a row versus Bears. Sometimes, a team just owns another team. And in this case, I'm not especially with Chicago in the position they're in, firing Waldron. The offensively, they're going to be kind of backed up a little bit. I lean towards some of the rushing props for the Bears because I think they're going to be running the ball a lot more today, knowing that they're kind of trying to get reorganized there on the offensive side. Kind of a late firing there early in the week, getting rid of Waldron, but I don't expect much from the offense here from the Bears. If anything, they're going to be running the ball a lot and not passing the ball a lot. And you shouldn't be in a position to ever fade Green Bay versus the Bears ever. Just take the trend and run with it, Green Bay, or pass.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff there. And again, it's just, this is where we see great statistical buys. Our guy in the chat says 0-3 ATS NFL is a great buy spot. It really is. And almost every one of my ATS plays this week is precisely that or even wider of a sample. So just great stuff here in week 11. Staying at 1 o'clock, a couple games we don't have officials on, but of course we bring you commentary on every game. Another unit from the NFC North this week, the Lions back home hosting the Jags with Mac Jones at quarterback. This is one of those classic lines in the NFL where usually it's not an underdog spot. I don't have the data in front of me, but I know when you see lines over 2 touchdowns historically, it just speaks to a blowout. It's not like college basketball or college football with like a frisky dog. This is pro football. If sportsbooks make a team this big of a favorite, they're just telling you this is a massive class difference. I could only look to the Lions. Guns, any thoughts?
Yeah, the same. I guess it's Lions or pass on this one. We've seen a double-digit favorite for them already this season against Tennessee. We talked backstage about it, and they put up 52 on Tennessee. So this is a real like slam spot. I know the Lions are coming off that nice highs of high win where we actually got the cover on the 3.5 with Houston, but they won with a late field goal. But they're coming home after a road back-to-back. And it's actually the similar spot with Tennessee. They came off a road back-to-back. They get back home, and they thumped Tennessee 52-14. You're going to see something similar today, in my opinion. There's a reason why that line is so high. You got to be taking Detroit only on this one. That's the way I'd go with it.
The interesting thing I like always to check here and see where Vegas puts it is they're trying to keep it out of any 10-point tees, out of any 6 to 7 point tees, right? So they're going to push that thing up as well. I actually lean a little bit towards the under. I think you could get maybe a lackluster effort from the Lions. Maybe they take their foot off the gas a little bit, but no, stay away from me. One, you could watch live, right? Maybe if they do come out the gate slow, you could get a decent buyback on Detroit for a game they ultimately win. Probably the most important or popular, rather, survivor pick in the league today if you still have the Lions available. So look out for that one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't lean towards the under in this type of game because oftentimes when you see these big numbers like 14, you'll see the total at like 38.5. And that's where you get like a 31-3 blowout. This kind of speaks to the Lions model, like very explosive offense. You know, they don't really kick a lot of field goals. They're constantly going for it. It's like a really hyper-aggressive, high-variance style of offense. And not only that, if you do go back to that game they played at home against the Titans, it was the Titans with a backup quarterback, Mason Rudolph. This is Mac Jones. And backup quarterbacks, similar to what we said about Jameis Winston and Derek Carr, they're more aggressive throwing the ball because they're trying to prove themselves in a really tight window. They may never get on the field again. So they're out there doing things that they probably wouldn't do if they were the starter. It just really opens up the game more. And that Tennessee game you saw with the Lions, like the game played almost like a college game. Like there were tons of turnovers. It was wide open. I think it finished close to 60 points or something, 52-14. I definitely wouldn't lean towards the Jags. And, you know, one final point on the Jags, which I think is very interesting. The Jags are actually 2-8 straight up. They're 6-3-1 ATS, which is absurd. Like, you guys know how rare that is to see a team that's 2-8 straight up, but 6-3-1 ATS. What that means is that they're actually way too hot against the spread, and they actually backdoored a bunch of games as an underdog in the 4-7 range with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. So forget Trevor Lawrence or Mac Jones. Just if you look at the Jags statistically, they're a sell team. So I think you actually like have some merit outside of the fact the Lions are just going to hammer them and it's just like a narrative. I think this is actually a statistical sell on the Jags. So, I mean, I wouldn't talk people off laying it with 14 and maybe the over there. So a little more conversation than we expected there, but keeping it moving. 1 o'clock, another out-of-division game. A lot of out-of-division games. Just interesting schedule spots in Week 11 here. Raiders at Dolphins. And Dolphins, I think, are pretty much the opposite. They have been awful against the spread. Started out, I believe, 0-4, 1-5. They started to show upward momentum last week at the Rams. Tua took a hit last week to the head. Did not look good, but he survived, thankfully. Maybe he's going to get into a flow. I mean, I'd like to see him get into a flow. I like his game, but I don't know. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I want to get there on the first half. I'm a little weary of it and kind of want to see how the game starts overall. But I do lean Miami. I think it's a good teaser leg. It could be a good exotic leg to throw in there because I think Miami's going to get it done. It really comes down to the Tua effect, right? I think you have teams going in opposite directions here. The Raiders kind of continue to crater. They do play hard for their guy. They've had some good spots and some good showings. But really, when talking about the Tua effect, and I'm not talking about the concussions here, after he got hurt during that first Buffalo matchup, this team scored 3 points in a loss at Seattle. They scored 12 points in a loss versus Tennessee, 15 points in a win, New England. They 15-10, an ugly one. And then 10 points in a loss versus Indy. Enter Tua. He comes back into the mix. They score 27, and they lose a tough game at Arizona, right? So now you're starting to talk about playoff caliber teams as well compared to what we were talking about before. So they still lose that, but they were up 10-0 at the end of the first quarter, and then it was 10-10 at halftime. 27, again, another tough loss against Buffalo, including a 10-6 halftime lead. And then what Shark just mentioned, they finally get there against the spread, 23 points in a primetime Rams matchup, including another 10-6 halftime lead. This team has continued to come out the gate a little bit stronger, and the offense has completely turned around and flipped. Statistically, you do get a better Raiders defense here than actually against the the way they line up against the Cardinals or the Bills. So maybe that brings a little bit of it back down to earth. And that's what I'm kind of worried about, right? Does that Raiders defense do enough to keep them in the game and keep them mixed here? But I do just think you're talking about night and day teams in terms of the Tua effect. And, for me, it's a lean to Miami. It's just when they get there and how they get there.
Yeah, guys, any thoughts on this one?
Lean over on this one, kind of. I'm just looking at the scoring. When we talk about the Raiders and what they're giving up, 32, 20, 27, 41 in their last 4 games. They also gave up 34 to Denver. And then you have a come up there ever since Tua came back. They were scoring they couldn't even surpass 20, but now they're getting 27, 27. And 23 in their last 3 since Tua came back. And then this used to be one of the slam spots that we used to do last year with Miami. Miami playing a remedial team at home. Yep. And with his team now kind of in full strength in this type of situation, and coming off a nice win on the road, you could be seeing a blowout here with the Dolphins. I hate to say it, but I think odds said it best. I think this is something that you put in a teaser leg because it's 7.5, and you can dip that down to a half a point. You're just picking a winner in there. Then you just got to find another one to put with a teaser leg that you can get over 2 key numbers on that one, and that one's a perfect one to go over 2 key numbers. So yeah, put them in a teaser, but I lean towards the over in this game.
Yeah, no, this is a tough game. As I mentioned, you want to buy Miami. ATS having started so poorly. I think this is actually a good sell of Vegas too, because Vegas is actually 2-1 road ATS outside of the division, which is purely just Gardner Minshew. Year 5, year 6, moving around. He's just a scrappy road quarterback where these certain teams just don't take him seriously. I think the best example of that being early season at Baltimore, where they actually won outright 26-23 at +8.5. However, I think that's coming to an end. They were fortunate to backdoor the Rams 20-15 at +6.5. That was Aiden O'Connell, I believe. But most recently, I believe it was last week or the week before, at Cincinnati. Same line, +7.5. Cincinnati 41-24. And if you guys recall, Cincinnati had been terrible at home ATS, and they had been very poor outside the division, laying big numbers. So Cincinnati finally got there, and the Raiders finally gave one away. And it's sportsbooks lines. When you see a team getting this number and covering, but books keep putting the same line out, what they're telling you is that we still think they're not very good. So you want to keep selling, not just assume that the recent history is going to always repeat and books are going to forever miss the lines. So I think you're potentially looking at Miami. It's a tough game nonetheless. 47 minutes in here, getting to the 4 o'clock slate. We have a lot of conversation here at 4 o'clock. Our only 3-way collab of the broadcast. Maybe not the game you guys were thinking, but we are honing in Mile High at 4 o'clock. Denver Broncos hosting the Falcons. I will throw it to Anthony for opening comments. Guns has a take. I have a take. A 3-way collab. And what's going on?
We got to get the 3-way collab record because there's been a few, and I think we're more wins than losses. But let's keep it going today. I'll keep this brief because I know you guys got to get into it too. But it's really, again, 2 teams trending in opposite directions. Atlanta 6-4, Denver 5-5, right? So record-wise, very interesting. But if you look at what these teams have done in one-score football games, that's where you should see a lot of this regression come into play because they've had the opposite effect on each other. I think this sets up nicely and perfectly for Denver trying to find some of that regression. They're at home, right? A little bit of altitude advantage maybe against a banged-up Atlanta squad. And on defense, Denver continues to be a strong unit and one that is number 1 in ESPN's pass rush win rate and blitzing at the NFL's second highest rate. I think only the Vikings and that Flores defense is just ahead of them. That's not an ideal formula for a banged up Atlanta Falcons team, for an immobile Kirk Cousins, right? I think they will correct some of their special teams miscues that they had last week. But I think you're going to get a strong running game here against Denver. For Denver, enough protection, and Bo Nix continues to improve. So I like Denver. I think it's a perfect spot. -2 for me.
Guns. Talk to me.
Yeah, same way, man. I'm not taking the points. I'm taking them on the money line at -130. That's how I'm going to do it. And the way you look at this is look at Denver and how they perform versus the NFC South this year. Win on the road versus Tampa 26-7, +129 net yards in that game. Win over New Orleans 33-10, +118 net yards in that game. Carolina 28-14, +116 net yards in that game. Full domination, 3-0 straight up and ATS versus the NFC South this year. And then you got to look at Atlanta situationally. They're on the second leg of a road back-to-back, and they have underperformed in those spots dating back to 2023. Lost to Jacksonville 23-7. Lost to Tennessee 28-23. Lost to New Orleans 48-17. So they've never performed on the second leg of a road back-to-back. And also got to look at how Atlanta has done versus non-conference opponents. They're on a 3-9 ATS streak dating back to 2022. And Denver has performed well as a home favorite. I mean, they're 2-0 ATS in those spots this season. Covering by an average of 6.8 points per game, and they're 3-0 ATS as a favorite overall this season. So they have excelled in this type of situation, and I think that we're looking at a loss here for Atlanta and a win on the road. And you have Denver losing 2 games in a row, but guess who they lost to? Okay, Baltimore and KC. Last time I checked, these 2 teams are pretty good in the AFC. So take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. And of course, Denver should have won last week. I mean, they had the field goal in their hands. Of course, the magic of the Chiefs yet again conquers another team. Denver's going to come in hot here. Give me Denver money line -130.
Completely agreed. My official play as well, money line -125. And, you guys said most of it. I'll just elaborate a little bit. This really is the Denver defense. Incredibly well coached, very fast, very detail-oriented. 6th in the league in yards against, 4th in points. It's very important because when you look at what Atlanta's been doing to cover spreads, they've just been going up and down the field. Renegade-style offense, mostly in the division. You talk about a team going outdoors, it doesn't get much worse than this. This is late season in Denver, outdoors against a great defense. And as is where the Falcons have really just been making their money inside of the division. And the NFC South is one of, if not the worst, top to bottom division football. So this is not where the Falcons are going to function well. And they are already 0-2 ATS against the AFC this year. Non-covers against Pittsburgh and Kansas City. And not coincidentally, Denver is actually 3-0 ATS this year versus the NFC South. So this really is just quality in terms of conference to conference, division to division. The AFC West is so much more superior in overall quality to the NFC South. So I saw some people on the Falcons. Again, Gunn said it, back-to-back road games off a tight loss. It's a brutal spot. I think Denver really brings the hammer here at 4 o'clock. 3-way collab, Denver money line and Anthony on the ATS side. Next play, no officials in this one, but to rip through it very quickly. Another divisional game. Seahawks at Niners, 4:05 Levi Stadium, Santa Clara. Tough game here, in my opinion. I think the Niners probably do get there. I think this is where the Niners will show sustained upward momentum. I don't like the fact that George Kittle's not playing today. I saw that overnight. That is a major hole in their armor. But nonetheless, I think they probably do get there. Tough game, though. Guns, any thoughts on this one?
Death taxes take the 49ers over Seattle. That's the only way you go with it. 6-0 straight up, 5-1 ATS. Last 6 meetings. I wouldn't buck the trend here on this one. You have Seattle that wants to pass the ball. They're ranked 3rd in pass play percentage, but you're going against the San Francisco defense that's ranked 6th in opponent pass completion rate, 6th in opponent passing yards per play. This is not a spot that I would ever be jumping up on Seattle. Seattle's lost 5 out of the last 6 games. They are off a bye, so they are rested on this one. But if San Francisco can establish the run versus a Seattle defense that struggles stopping the run, they're ranked 26 in opposing rushing yards per carry, and 26 in yards per game. I think that's probably the way they're going to go. And you mentioned Kittle not being in that offense. To me, that doesn't matter. I think they're going to be focusing on the run and controlling the game on this one. I would probably I lean towards the San Francisco side on this one. Just don't buck the trend. Seattle always takes care of. I'm sorry, San Francisco always takes care of Seattle. So San Francisco's the lean.
Yeah. It's honestly, like, in terms of the actual line, it's very sharp. The line when these teams played earlier this year in Seattle, San Francisco -3.5. Home to road should be about 3 for neutrality. This opened at 6.5. Right. Total push line. I think this is really well averaged, right around a touchdown. San Francisco. Any thoughts on the total or anything?
No, I think for me, division matchups are always tough, right? Especially the second go around. And I think you just have a San Francisco team that could be coming into form at the perfect time. I was expecting to see a little bit of that last week. They did start that early on. They had a little bit of a lull in the middle of that game, and then they kind of stormed back. I think a big win for them to get that under their belt. And I think you could, again, see that continued upward momentum this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking a breath, biggest game of the board, a collab official, myself and the gun, taking Buffalo on the money line at 425. And you talk about a massive, massive football game here in week 11. It really doesn't get any bigger than this in contemporary football. Buffalo 8-2, 4-0 at home. Kansas City 4-0 on the road, 9-0 overall. This is where it comes to an end on Sunday, November the 17th. And if you really go through Kansas City, this is one of the most fraudulent 9-0 teams you will ever see. And I'm not taking any shots at Kansas City's Super Bowl runs from previous seasons or their overall quality. I think they're a very, very good, historically great football team. But if you really go through these last handful of wins, caught the Chargers with Herbert injured, caught the Saints with Carr injured, caught the Niners without McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, and Jennings, beat the Raiders with a backup quarterback without Devontae Adams. He had just been traded, barely beat the Bucs in overtime without Evans and Godwin. And then last week, blocked a 25-yard field goal that would have had Denver winning the game. So you've won 9 in a row. These teams are all injured. You had to go to overtime 2 weeks ago. Last week, you had to block a kick. And now you have to go on the road to a Buffalo team that is in a massive revenge spot in an incredibly hostile, loud Orchard Park, New York. And if you actually look at what's going on between Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes in their careers, Mahomes has gotten the better of Allen in the playoffs multiple times. Allen is actually 3-1 overall, 3-0 ATS against Mahomes in the regular season. He's actually beaten him 3 straight years in the regular season. 38-20 in 2021, 24-20 2022. Last year, 20-17. Key point, all on the road. This is the first time Josh Allen gets Mahomes in his home stadium in the regular season. And speaking of playing in the home stadium here in Buffalo, go back to January 21st, divisional playoffs. Kansas City 27-20. Absolutely excruciating loss for Buffalo. Tyler Bass missed a 44-yard field goal to tie the game and go to overtime. And Buffalo did have 27 first downs in that game, only 21 for Kansas City. This is a massive revenge game. It's a statistical buy low. It's an incredible statistical sell high on Kansas City. They are trending towards a loss. They tried to lose 2 weeks in a row at home to far inferior competition to this point. I was on my show with J.A. Cavalier, my guy, this week, and he said, I'm laying an alt line -10 with Buffalo. That's how strong this spot could be. Love Buffalo today. And the gun, collab, guns. Talk to me.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think it's Buffalo or pass. If it's regular season and Buffalo's going against KC at home, I'm taking Buffalo every time. I don't care if this team is undefeated. Yes, they're 9-0 on the year, but you have a Buffalo team that is on a 5-game win streak and off a road win versus Indianapolis. They're 8-2 on the year with a plus 10-point differential, but this team performs absolutely well in Orchard Park, averaging 36 points per game there. They're 4-0 straight up at home, and they have a plus 17-point differential. They absolutely dominate their opponents there at home. And then Buffalo's done well versus non-conference opponents this year. 6-point win versus Arizona, 37-point win versus Jacksonville, a 24-point win versus Tennessee. This team is thumping teams by margin in these spots. Now, KC basically plays to the level of their competition. We've seen it all season. Shark brought up a lot of the key points on that one, but two games were wins within one possession, and they've trailed in all but one game this season. So that's another key point on this one. And then the kicker issue with KC. No bucking this guy. He looks